Hi folks! Welcome to today's episode where we are going to focus on the topic related to microservices, and this topic will be the decision drivers or decision factors or disintegrators that you might use when deciding to go for microservices. Yes, that's true. Microservices are not always the perfect way to go. It should not be our default pattern when building new greenfield applications. You should always have some kind of a driver that drives this decision to go into microservices. What might be interesting to you is that big players like Stack Overflow are not using these microservices. They use monolith application, which is then scaled entirely to different multiple web servers. And that's the perfect example of the website, the application that is used by tons of people and does not require microservices architecture. Another great example is Prime Video team that described their case where they just moved with one of the services from the microservices architecture to monolithic application. So as you can see, it's not always the best way just to choose microservices in the beginning. If you ask me, I am the big fan of modular monolith. So whenever you have your greenfield application and you do not know the traffic that will come there, of course you might think we will have millions of users or so, but until you don't have it, it's really safe and easier, way easier to just follow modular monolith approach within your application. But at some point it starts to be quite complex to just do this modular monolith for all the modules that you have, and it is exactly this moment where you can think of moving one of the modules into microservices architecture, and then again when needed you can extract next and next modules. And this is the place where we will start today's episode with these decision drivers. So let's start with the first driver. Imagine that you have your application. It's this monolith or modular monolith. It's better if it will be modularized, of course. And now you need to scale because there is more and more traffic that is coming to your application. So whenever you need to scale, you need to scale entire application. It doesn't matter that one of the modules was used more than others. You have to scale all the modules because you have just single deployment unit. And that's the first case where you can think of extracting this module that you need to scale or modules that you need to scale to microservices, because then whenever it's a need to scale something, you just scale this particular module. Now you will have single deployment unit related to your modular monolith and another deployment unit related to the extracted module to the microservice. And this way you will have already multiple deployment units and you can just react on the real needs. Number two, so second decision driver that you can use to decide if you need now to extract to microservice is the change frequency. So you can imagine a situation where inside your application you have a module that is frequently changed. So this business logic is adjusted, new processes come in and so on. But other modules are not changed that often. So imagine that you have a continuous deployment of such an application and now you need to continuously deploy all the modules even though you have not used these modules and you have not changed these modules that are not the one that is frequently changed. And that's the perfect place to just apply this decision driver and decide to extract this frequently changed module into the separate microservice. So here we are talking about the frequency of changes. If there is a huge difference between one module and other modules, it makes sense to just grab this frequently changed module and extract it. The next decision driver that you can think of is related to security. There might be a situation that inside your application you have modules that are less secured or needs to be just secured somehow, but but does not require a lot of security, and other modules that have to be really secured. So instead of applying the security option for all the modules that you have inside your application, you are just applying it for one concrete module, and therefore you can just take this module, extract it to a microservice, and do this security there. So in a completely separate code base, in a completely separate deployment unit. So this is number 3 on my list. Number 4 is related to number 1. In number 1 we were scaling entire application, and then at some point it made sense to just extract some modules and scale them because of the costs that you would have with this scale of the entire modular monolith. But in this number 4 point, we will be talking about a module that is stealing the show. Imagine that you have an application and other modules are not used almost at all, and one module is heavily used. So the traffic there is extreme in comparison to other modules. Then this is the indicator that, hey, it makes no sense to keep this module inside this modular monolith, and it would be better to just take and extract it to the separate deployment unit. So in our case, a microservice. The last point, number 5 on my list, is related to the code base itself. In the beginning, when we are starting with a project or a product, we usually have quite a small team of developers. Maybe there will be 3, 4, 5 developers. Within years and with acquisition of new companies, new business domains, we have more and more subdomains which create bounded contexts. And then one team is definitely not enough to tackle down all the traffic of the features that we need to apply. So therefore, we have other teams, second, third, fourth, fifth team, and we have more and more code in a single repository, and there is just a single deployment unit. At some point, it might become a maze, code maze, really. So it might make sense in this case to just grab this bounded context that you have and extract them to separate deployment units and put these teams which are responsible for this bounded context to just work on their repository, their code base, and their business subdomains. And this is very important to just spot it in correct time, because at some point it might be really tough to just add new features and have to inform other teams about these features. Even though they are not related, they have to somehow agree that, hey, we will be doing changes in our monolith repository and you need just to be careful about these changes. So this might be another point. However, it's of course discussable, because you can have a code base that is ran within several teams and it's just a single repository and it can work fine. However, usually it makes sense to just extract it to separate code bases. These are my top 5 disintegrators when it comes to the decision when to just go into the microservice world. Let me know in the comments section if you use similar decision drivers, or you have some other decision drivers that you use, or maybe you don't use them at all, you just fall into these microservices as a default model. Of course, there are many more decision drivers that we could have talked today about, but these are the ones that I think are used the most. So thank you very much for watching today's episode, and see you next Friday.